everybody, this is Jim Nate from Jim Nate Woodworks again. Today I want to go over a project that I just finished for my daughter. She does a lot of drawing and painting and wanted to make a art table that she can fold down to do her projects, but then when she's done, fold it up and out of the way, and she wanted it to look like kind of like a picture frame and store some of her drawings and paintings and stuff. So after looking on the internet quite a bit, I couldn't find any examples of a project similar, so this is the design we came up with. So this is how it works. It's up in the folded position. It can store 15 different pictures. Then it has a latching mechanism up here to release the table. And the legs are built into the sides. So it comes down, and this is the drawing surface. Is a piece of 1/2-inch plexiglass, so it's very smooth and durable, and you can stick tape to it easily for holding down the paper. It has an adjustable back, so you can change the angle like that, and it goes up to about here. So for like freehand drawing, when you want to stand, you can actually get it up to a near vertical position, and then for sitting, you can adjust it down to this. So the other feature that it has is behind here is a 2-foot by 2-foot suspended ceiling light for doing backlighting, so you can do tracing. So we can plug in the power supply. Well, first we also have a kind of a pencil catch lip that goes on the bottom, and it's held on with rare earth magnets. So this goes on like that, and so now there's about a 1/4-inch lip here to keep things from running off the table. And then the power cord for the light plugs in there, and then it turns on, and it's pretty bright. It's easily as bright or brighter than holding paper up to a window, so you can see through the paper very well this way. The latches are built in here to hold the table up. When you push this button, it pops these 2 pins out of the way. So that's how it works. It's pretty easy. One person can set the height easily, and then it folds up out of the way. Just like that. Now I'm going to talk about how I actually built it. So the rest of the video is going to go over all the little pieces and stuff. All the hinges for the bottom for the holding the table up, and the ones that hold these legs on, they're all custom hardware that I just welded together, basically out of stainless steel strap and 1/2-inch round stock that I just bought on Amazon. So there's no real hardware from any stores here, so it's all hand built because it needed to be, since it's kind of a unique piece. Here's a close-up shot of the frame. This is some leftover sapele I had left from a bed project I did last year. I love this wood. It's a very good replacement for mahogany. You can find striped sapele that looks just like striped mahogany, and you can find straight grain stuff, and it varies quite a bit from batch to batch as well. So you can kind of find anything you're looking for that mahogany comes in. At least to me it looks that way. But instead of being super expensive like mahogany is now, it's more moderate. It's at least for me in the Phoenix area, it's priced somewhere around hard maple or something, $7 to $9 a square foot or board foot. But it's very hard, it's very strong, it finishes in machines and sands very well. So I like it better than mahogany because it looks just like it, but especially for like tabletops or things that are going to get dings and stuff, mahogany is just too soft. It really takes a beating and gets dinged up a lot, and sapele doesn't have any of that problem. This is the table in its highest position, open, with the light on. You can see the kind of spottiness of the LEDs. I'll show later why that is, but it really doesn't matter. It doesn't affect the ability to do tracing with the light. And this is with the light on and a piece of painting parchment over the top, so you can kind of see the spottiness goes away as you put more pieces of paper on there. So it really doesn't affect the usability of the backlight. The first part of this project that I built was the front grille because I wanted to get the hole size for all the pictures right. That was supposed to be 6-inch squares all the way around the perimeter, and then 18 by 12 in the middle. So I built this frame first and kind of did everything else around it. So here I just have the initial sticks kind of laid out just to make sure this is what I wanted and the basic proportion that I liked. So all the small inner pieces are held together with small mortise and tenon joints, and then the outside frame is just mitered at 45 degrees with a couple of spline joints in the corner to make it stronger. So here I have the slats where I'm cutting the tenons on with my Avid CNC. The vertical holding jig makes pretty quick work of clamping these on and running it. The mortise and tenon joint is the same exact size for each one, so I can just simply clamp in each piece and rerun the G-code file for this. And here we're cutting the mortises out on my Avid CNC as well. In this case, I made a simple jig with a slot in it cut out of a 2x4, so with lines drawn on it where the edges of the adjoining piece was marked. This way I can easily drop the piece in, line up the lines and clamp it down, and then just keep repeating the mortise cut in the same position. So when you cut these on the CNC, they fit like a glove. You can dial it in down to a couple thousandths of an inch just so you don't want to make them too tight. Like if I made this one an extra thousandths all the way around a tolerance because I want to be able to let the air and the glue get out. This one's tight, but it'll allow the glue to get out. If I had it 1/1000th smaller on the mortise, and it would just like slide down slow because the air could just barely get out, and that's too tight for glue. So here I'm doing the third round of glue up on the grill. This is one of those parts that just has too many pieces to try and get glue spread on and get everything put together and then clamped and nice and square and everything all in one shot. I live in Arizona and it's hot and dry here, so the glue starts to skin over in a couple of minutes, and so it's really not practical to glue this all up at once. So I have done each side, the 4 pieces sticking out of each side first. What I usually do is I'll glue one side of the joints, the tenons and mortises on one piece, and I'll just use the other piece so that you can see sitting there in the background as the guide to clamp it so that everything is aligned, but then I'll come back and glue that side of it later. So here I'm just gluing the ends as the 2 sides have been glued already. All right, here we have the finished grill. Well, it's not finished, but it needs some sanding and some glue scraping, and then the final finish on top of the wood. But this is all glued up, and now we'll move on to constructing the core of the table itself. So I've got my tabletop, at least the center core of it, machined out now on the CNC to receive the lights and the panel. And what I'm using, this is just a 24-inch square suspended ceiling light. That comes normally with a frame around it and everything to hang from the ceiling. What I did was that whole assembly was about 1 inch thick, and I didn't want that much thickness, otherwise my whole table, when it's flipped up against the wall, would stick out from the wall too far. So I cut this down to about 5/8 of an inch thick, so it fits down in here now.
and then the cover that came with it goes on the top of it. It's a little dirty. One thing I wanted to show is that you got to be a little careful with reducing the thickness. If you look at these LEDs, they have a certain angle of their lenses, and so these were spaced appropriately based on that angle and the thickness of the whole assembly. So you can tell if I put this cover down, I get a bunch of bright spots, but as you move it back, it becomes pretty even light. And so the way that was originally designed, it was about 1 inch thick, and it made a very nice uniform light. Well, I can't have that much thickness, so this light table is just going to have to be a little bit spotty when it's turned on like this, but that's okay. The whole purpose of this is to be able to trace something from one drawing or a piece of paper onto another, like you would up against a window. So when you actually put a piece of paper on this to trace, you don't really notice these drop spots. And what I still need to do is I'm going to put little plexiglass pillars in here to support this, because I don't want it to push down like this. And then on top of that, I have this piece of frosted plexiglass that's the actual tabletop. So that diffuses it a little more. I have to sand it some more. This is actually a 1/2 inch piece of acrylic. It used to be completely clear. I sanded it on both sides to make it, give it the frosted look, because I want, first of all, I don't want to see through it. I'm going to paint this wood and the MDF all white, so that when the light is turned off, this basically looks like a white top. But I'm going to sand it a little bit more to get a little more frost look, but this is kind of the way it's going to be. So it'll all look white when it's turned off, and then obviously it'll have the light shine through like that when it's turned on. So that's kind of the whole stack up of that sandwich. With the CNC, I cut out a large pocket to drop the light into, and a real shallow lip around that to countersink the cover or light shade that came with the light. Here's a picture with the 1/2 inch plexiglass half sanded. So I want this top to be smooth enough that temporary tape could be used easily, like painter's tape, to hold down the painting projects, but I didn't want it really shiny and reflective, and I wanted it to really kind of disperse the light from the backlight well. So, and I also didn't really want to make the surface, the light, and the wood frame very visible underneath. So I wanted a nice opaque finish. So I just sanded this with a random orbit sander. On one side, I did 220 grit. That was the back side. That gave me the most opaque. And then on the top usable side, I used 320 grit because I didn't want it too coarse, just because I want the tape to stick to it semi well yet. One tip for sanding plexiglass like this, and kind of any plastic, they tend, and some wood finishes do this too, they tend to really plug up the sandpaper. They build up these tiny little dots you can kind of see on here, and what that does is make kind of streaks on the surface that you're sanding, and these can plug up and cause this really rapidly. In fact, even 30 seconds of sanding in some cases caused this for me. But the easiest way to clean it is just to keep an air hose from an air compressor handy with a blast jet, a nozzle. I turn the sander on so it spins and just kind of go from the outside to the inside, and it blows these little plastic globs that are basically melted plastic. It blows them right off really easily, and so just every 30 seconds to a minute, I flip the sander up, blow it off, and then get back to sanding, and it really makes this last a long time. Otherwise, you have to use a fingernail or something to scrape it off, and that just takes forever. Okay, here's the final core of the table. painted on the surface so it's white, it matches the light. The light is dropped in and glued in. You can also see the little plexiglass standoffs I put in there. These are basically, I bought a 1/2 inch diameter plexiglass rod off of Amazon and just cut it to the right length, so it's effectively a clear standoff. I didn't want it to leave a big shadow behind the light, so I used plexiglass instead of just like wood or metal, and it's kind of nice. It really doesn't show up at all with a shadow or anything, and I just glued it down with some epoxy. So these are spread out at an even distance across, and that keeps that filter plastic from sagging down into the light array, because I basically have this upside down from the way it was meant to be used, and I need to have the tabletop supported in the middle, so when people lean on it or something, I don't want it sagging in. So now it's time to take a look at the latch mechanism. This is at the very top of the table, and it's what keeps the table securely up inside the frame when it's not in use. So you can see those 2 pins there sticking down. Those are received by holes in the edge of the table when it's in the upright position. So we'll take a look at what these pieces look like when this is taken apart now. So this is what the guts of the latch look like when they're taken apart and laid to the side. So essentially I cut this pocket out with the CNC. There's a hole all the way through in the center for a little button that pushes down, which pushes these 2 curved levers. There's a couple springs on the back to keep them pushed down in the closed position, and then there's underneath there's a stainless steel hinge pin, essentially, or pivot pin, that the spring pushes the boards up against, and that holds them in place. But they basically rock on that, but they can't be pushed down farther, because underneath that there's a place for the there's essentially a wood, kind of like a little wall holding it there. So everything is held in place, but mostly when the springs are in there, the curved piece of the latch rotates against the stainless steel wire. It's just this is actually some welding rod from a TIG welder that I used for those 2 pins, and the curved pieces are also cut out in the CNC. So here it is put together. So when I push the button that's on the top, you can see it rotates the 2 levers on the stainless steel pins and retracts it. So cut this all with the CNC. It worked pretty smoothly. Now it's time to take a look at how the hinges work. This is kind of the side view with the side of the frame. There's a frame that bolts to the wall that holds the slots and the stop positions for the sliding / pivoting hinge that's on the left side of this view. And then there's a hinge for the legs that's on the sort of the upper right part of this view. And that is just to hold the legs on and allow them to rotate. So this kind of gives you an idea how that leg overlaps and covers up the frame piece, and how the hinge can go through the frame to reach that. And the frame is just screwed together with some 3.5-inch screws. So the pivoting hinge for the tabletop is the simplest of the 2. This is just started out as some 1-inch wide by 1/4-inch thick stainless steel stock and some 1/2-inch diameter stainless steel dowel rod, and I just simply cut the strap off into this rectangular piece, drilled some holes in it with some countersinks, and drilled a hole through it that's a 1/2-inch diameter. The back of that rod sticks out about about 2 more inches, and is embedded in a hole so that it's very strong. It fits in a tight hole in that Sapele board, and it's welded to the back of the plate there, so you can't see the weld on this side. I didn't want that to be visible, so it's basically kind of a T-shaped piece with a longer rod in the back, and it just sticks out long enough on this side to fit in the groove almost to the bottom without rubbing in the bottom of the groove. And so this is the piece that the table pivots on, as well as it can be lifted up and hooked onto those little detent areas that you saw on the previous slide. Now we're looking at the top hinge, which is just a hinge for the leg itself. So in this picture we can see the tabletop on the upper portion, then the hinge laying there, and then the leg for the right side of the table. The leg was cut out on the CNC and has a recessed area for the oval shaped piece that bolts in there. The hinge itself is made again out of 1 inch by 1 inch wide by 1/4 inch thick stainless steel strap. I bent it into an L shape and drilled a hole through it and welded it on the inside. And then the piece that bolts to the leg is another piece of the strap that I ground down into kind of an oval shape, and I welded a piece of stainless steel bushing to it, so it's got about a 3/4 inch diameter, or a 3/4 inch length piece that's just a hair over 1/2 inch diameter on the inside. So this fits very tightly on that stainless steel dowel. And then on the end of the dowel I've drilled and tapped a screw hole, and then so there's a screw with a stainless steel washer that holds that on the end so that can't slip off. And that's how the legs are attached to the main table. This is a very strong hinge, and it has to be because it's the single attachment point of the legs, so it has to be a pretty robust hinge there. And this area of the wood is also left taller so that I can get some pretty big screws in there and sink that 3/4 inch or so of the round tightly into the board. You can also see that there's a plastic nylon washer in there. That's to give a little bit of a gap. I want that. First of all, I want it to be tight and kind of low friction, but I also want to have a little bit of a gap between the two metal pieces so they wouldn't be scraping, and that the wood wouldn't get scraped between the tabletop and the leg. This is a little bit of a different angle so you can see how the hinge mortises into the main desktop panel, as well as how that end cap on the bushing material holds that whole hinge together. Now I needed to get those nylon washers down to just the exact thickness so that they took up the gap properly. And of course, anything I purchased wouldn't be the right size. These started out as 1/8 inch thick washers. So I found an easy way to thin those down nicely was to use some double-sided tape and just glue them to a strip of wood and run them through my drum sander until they were the correct thickness. The legs I cut out on the CNC as well. It was an easy way to cut the round part around the hinge out and the pocket, so this is where it sort of fits into the frame of the piece that bolts to the wall, and give myself a nice round radius for that piece to pivot next to the other piece of wood where the hinge is. It would be a lot harder to freehand this route or cut it out in any other way. And this is the final assembled piece. It does not have the plexiglass or the mat for the pictures shown here, but this is essentially the completed piece before final sanding and finishing, and you can kind of see how the grill and the back fit in there. Well, this was the end of the project. It was fairly complicated to figure out the hinging mechanisms to get this to fold up inside of a frame and mount on the wall and not look like a table. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I looked all over on the internet, and most of the fold-down tables that I found looked like fold-down tables. It was pretty obvious when you looked at them. It was, some kind of a folded table bolted to the wall. I really wanted this to look like a picture frame and not be obvious that it was a table, and I think we succeeded there. So it was a fun project, and thank you for watching. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them down in the comments section. I always answer all of the questions and comments. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.